My name is Era, and I'm the host of the Tamil Creator Podcast. I chat with creators from all over the world to share their stories and discuss hot topics in a way that I hope inspires, educates, and entertains you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tamil Creator. I'm your host, Era, and today I have a very special guest. For those of you who are fans of TamilCulture.com, you might have seen some of his writing. His name is Ratnavel. I personally love his story. I'm going to read the summary that I have here. But, basically after he's forced to leave war-torn Sri Lanka at a very young age and immigrated to Canada, Roy started as a mail clerk at CI Global Asset Management, and over the span of about 30 years, has made the leap to executive vice president at CI Financial, as well as the head of distribution for CI Global Asset Management. So, I'm super excited to kind of chat with Roy. Before we kind of get into, letting Roy introduce himself and his story, I'll quickly share how we met. And Roy, you can kind of refresh my memory on this, but I was thinking about this before our conversation today. And I think I saw you comment or post on somebody's comment on Facebook, and I think I added you and messaged you. And we actually ended up meeting physically at the Vancouver airport, right? I think it was like 5 to 7 years ago, right?
Yes, exactly. You're right.
And that's, I think a lot has changed for you. Obviously, you're in Toronto now, but you know what? I'll let Roy kind of introduce himself, talk a bit about kind of, his upbringing in Sri Lanka and kind of the journey over to Canada, and then we'll kind of take it from there. So Roy, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. It's quite the honor. You're right. I think we somehow met through social media, and I do believe it was a Sunday. I was flying out to a business meeting for Monday somewhere in North America. I can't remember, but I just happened to mention to you on my phone or text, whatever I sent you, saying, "Hey, I'm in the Vancouver airport." Unbeknownst to me, you were apparently there too at the same time at a different terminal. I guess you were heading to Toronto. And then we met at the restaurant. I was having lunch and you came and joined me quickly. And then that's how we met. And look, I really enjoy doing this stuff like this, especially now that I am, sort of done different kind of stuff throughout my life, pre-decade of work experience. And I really love having conversation. Presumably this reaches a lot of young people, aspiring entrepreneurs and professionals of the future. So it gives me immense pleasure to share my thoughts, whether it doesn't matter, it's just my thoughts. So there might be some few nuggets that you can take and apply in your life as you see fit. So where do you want me to start? Maybe I'll give you a little bit of background of, how I got here to Canada and what transpired in maybe 3 minutes. So I was born in Colombo, Sri Lanka, many decades ago, and as most of you are listening, there were political issues, and it got intensified a little bit later after I was born. So my father was concerned for both of his sons' lives and his wife's life. So he decided to send us to our ancestral hometown, which is Point Pedro, which is the furthest point on the island in the north. So I sort of started my formal education at Hartley College, which is a venerable institution, one of the oldest in Sri Lanka. It was built in 1838, and my family went there, my dad, my uncle. So it's more of a family legacy for me to go to that school. Yeah, I mean, look, the life was fun. I enjoyed a livable level of decency provided by my parents and the town of Point Pedro. Had a fun-filled, laughter-loaded life during those days, pulling pranks just like most of the teenagers would do. But all that changed very quickly after a series of terrible events in the South. And again, to refresh people's memory, if you haven't heard of the Black July event on July 24th of 1983, basically lit the fuse on the communal tension between Tamils and Sinhalese. So the war intensified and basically came to our backyard in Point Pedro, shelling, nightly bombing and killings, and losing a lot of my friends to shelling and stuff. And then 87 rolled around, My father was in town at the time, and there was one thing called Operation Liberation, which was basically the Sri Lankan government's operation to get rid of or at least capture Jaffna Peninsula, which included Point Good town as well. So they came into town and basically took me to jail for 3 months in southern part called Buza camp. And so I spent 3 months there. It was a horrific experience in my life, something I don't wish anyone to live through. But I do think that type of experience did help me to shape who I am. There was some silver lining in that, but certainly that's not the way to learn life lessons. But nonetheless, that's what happened to me. So when I came out of prison at the age of 17, my dad decided that there's really no future for a young guy like me in Sri Lanka, and found a passage to Canada in 1988. And that's how I started here. I came here at the age of 18. I did have an uncle here, but I didn't really know anyone else. But so I had to find my way from that to where I am today. So it's been a hard-won battle, but a remarkable ride, and I'm quite enjoying it now, thinking back.
So, you kind of landed here in Canada, like you said, you just had an uncle that you barely knew, so no real social support system in Canada. It's a brand new country, obviously, as well. So how did you like what did you do as your first jobs, or like kind of how did you like manage to support yourself? And then how did you end up with that mail clerk position at CI?
Yeah, I mean, look, sometimes they say fate designs destiny, and initial intention for me to come to Canada was to really get a better education because I missed school for 2 years and I haven't seen the inside of a school for 2 years, and there was war going on. There's no normalcy, so my dad decided to send me here. So the idea was he was going to send me here and still continue to somehow find way to support me at least partially, and then I was going to study here. My uncle was going to help me, but unfortunately, 2 days after I landed, my father was shot and killed. Um, so that put an end to my aspiring educational pursuit, and so I had to go find ways to keep my belly full of food and a roof over my shoulder. And at that time, I decided to myself that after father's death, that I have to live for two people, one for me and for him, and that's how I started working. So I just got, just like any new immigrant would do, I was working in factories and cleaning buildings and working as a security guard. So I did all that, all three. So I had three jobs. I work in a factory during the daytime, clean buildings at night, and then I would do a security job in the weekends, 12-hour shift. It starts at noon and goes till midnight. Saturday noon to Friday midnight to Saturday noon, and Saturday midnight to Sunday noon. And then I just realized that I had to break that cycle because there was no way I'm going to achieve my goals or dreams if I wanted to live for two people. I wasn't going to do it. So one time the time I was living with a bunch of guys in the East End to save money. We rented a house with, I don't know, 10 people or something. So it's just a crowded place. Probably broke a lot of, maybe it's a fire hazard too. But yeah, one night I came home and I was flipping through the Toronto Sun newspaper, and then I found a job posting in the back of the ads. It said uh, mailroom clerk or office help needed, 14K. I didn't even know what the K meant, to be honest. I just applied the job. And then, yeah, so that's how I started. At the time, CI Global Asset Management was a tiny company. I was the 25th employee, privately owned. And I got the job as the lowest man in the company. And that was 30 years ago and a dozen promotions ago. And then here I am sitting at the as the head of distribution and the executive for it's the asset management. Now it is about $300 billion company with offices around the globe.
That's amazing. I think I saw either on social media or somewhere where you posted that letter. And I just love stories like that because for me, I'm a long-term thinker. I admire people that can kind of stick to something for a long period of time just because it's such a like a rarity I find in this day and age. I guess the term is grit, and I'm a big fan of that. Um, maybe besides grit, or maybe you want to talk about that as well, but what are some like traits that you see that are in short supply in this day and age that you think are required for success?
I mean, I think, the it's sort of a cliche to say certain things, but they are still true. The success, how to reach success, really, I mean, at the end of the day, if you have a passion and you can change the passion into profits, I mean, that's the best scenario. But I was 18, I had no passion except just wanted to get a paycheck. But once I got into it, I really understood this business, meaning asset management, is something interesting, something that I could really understand. And I would read about it, and I thought maybe I should pursue a career in that. And there's a reason for it, which we'll probably get into how I got into sort of becoming where I am today. But I would say the two traits that I always think that's important is there are many stuff, obviously, and like I said, what I say here may not apply to other people, but I'm going to tell you what I did, and it might make sense to some of the listeners, it might not to others, but that's just fine. Um, I think that the two key ingredients that work for me is really working hard, and I'll tell you what working hard is in a bit, but and then risk taking. You have to take some risk, and I mean that's one thing I really love seeing now in the younger up and coming Tamil generation, people like yourselves. It's just that that ability to take the risk. I think your parents certainly took the risk, crossing many oceans, many nations to help the next generation. That's taking a massive risk. But when we came here, they had to do jobs that aren't too risky because you needed stability and to provide cash flow to the family. Now that we have young people like yourselves who are listening as well, risk taking is very important. I'm not saying just be blindly swing at things, but calculated risk. So I would work hard in the sense, I always hear people say work smart, not hard. I always say, it goes the other way. If you work hard, eventually you figure out what the smart actions and activities are. But you have to start somewhere. I always worked harder than anyone else in the company. Um, I wanted to differentiate myself. So working hard, you start with that, you get noticed. Then you're working hard results in some quality output or outcome to the company or the project that you're working on. And that's how you get recognized. And then you got to take risk. Don't settle for complacency will lead to failure. I had a rule that I would never want to stay in a role any more than a decade. I think that it takes about 3 years to perfect or understand a role properly, and then it takes about another 5 years to perfect it. And you want to put a mark on it in 2 years, and 10 years is my kind of thing. But the higher I got to the top end of that 10-year mark. If I was in the mailroom, I wasn't going to be in the mailroom for 10 years. I would probably hurt myself. But when I got to senior positions, I would push close to 7, 8, sometimes 10 years. But I'd never been in the same role for more than a decade because that's how you deteriorate, and it becomes it's muscle atrophy. If you don't use because the job becomes so easy that you don't really challenge yourself. And it's like going to the gym, I always say. If you work on the same muscle group, you're never going to grow. Resistance will make your muscles grow. Same with human beings. We need resistance. We do better in adversity than in luxury. So those are two things I would say: work hard, take risk.
This episode is sponsored by nobody. That's right, nobody. So if you could be kind enough to hit that subscribe button, that would mean a lot to me. Got it. Yeah, I guess, you kind of touched on this earlier where, yeah, you've been at CI for like 30 years. And like I said, I think that kind of I think career journey is super rare. I mean, there's a small group of people that kind of have done that, but what made you stay at that company? And when I think of somebody staying that long, I think about, things like there must be some kind of great environment, an environment where there's opportunities, somebody that must have kind of either looked out for you or kind of been that helping hand to kind of help you from that meal room clerk position to where you are today.
Mhm.
I think of a story I heard. This entrepreneur talked about how one of her first jobs was she was a bagger at the grocery store, and they asked her like, how did you like approach that job? She's like, I approach it like I do as now that I'm an entrepreneur. Like I want to be the best bagger there was because it doesn't
Right,
matter if you're the bagger, the manager, et cetera, et cetera. Every person at the company has an important role to play, no matter, you can't downplay somebody's role. Everything, all the parts kind of fit together and do their job. So
right.
it just really stuck with me. And like, I imagine your story is quite similar, but I'll let you kind of elaborate on that. Like, what was kind of your career trajectory of like mailroom clerk, and then how did you start moving up from there?
Yeah, I mean, there was I completely agree with the comment you made about if you're a grocery bagger, you just got to be the best one in the crew. Um, it's all about always differentiating yourself from the crowd. I've heard that 9 out of 10 interactions are not memorable. And so how do you become memorable? So I've been in sales for now 20 years, and there are a lot of people like myself in a suit and kind of say the same thing. And you're not memorable if you're just part of the crowd. So just to go back to my little story about how I got here, I was in the mailroom, and one day this well-dressed gentleman walks in to drop the mail, and looks like he walked out of a GQ magazine. And I always had a great affinity for nice ties because my dad had nice ties when I was, I remember him in Colombo and going to work, and at least nice by my standard at the time. So I just made a comment to him, hey, nice tie. And he kind of said, oh, thank you. And put his hand out and introduced himself. His name was Bill Holland, and he was at the time one of the VPs of sales. And a young guy, probably, he would have been in his 30s, early 30s, and I was in my late late teens. And then a week later, I saw a shopping bag on my little desk in the mailroom, and I opened it up, and there's Amani, Brioni, and Canali, and Xenia, and the ties that he isn't using anymore, or wasn't using anymore, were given to me. And needless to say, I was the best dressed mailroom boy on Bay Street. And so we sort of struck up a relationship, and he was a keen observer. He understood that I come from a culture where lots of values put on education, and he felt that I was wasting my life in mailroom and working. He didn't really know my background, why I was working. He thought I was a high school dropout. Um, and he would sort of was very curious about my life, and he would come and talk to me whenever he's in town. He's a traveling salesman, and we struck up a relationship. And he, you know, pretty much pulled me out of the mailroom because I pulled one of those differentiating move. There was a back ordered materials that we had to send out. I'll make this quick. And they were going to hire some part-time person to come and help me, which I wasn't going to allow that. So one night after everybody left for home on a Friday night, I stayed till 2 in the morning, filling all the orders. I didn't even apply for overtime. And he heard about it, and he was absolutely blown away that somebody would actually take the initiative. And he said, you should not be in mailroom. You're wasting away here. We're going to put you in service, customer service. So I got there, and then eventually pushed me to get into sales and got me to get into U of T. So helped me apply for the job, sorry, U of T. And so I did my mature student program at U of T to get my degree. And then eventually put me in sales because that's exactly what I wanted to do. And I want to be like this guy. And to my luck, he became the CEO. And as he kept rising in the company, I kept rising with him. But he wasn't. Nothing was given to me for free. I mean, I had to I had to prove my worth. And then now he's the chairman of the board, and we still talk at least once a week, or meet for drinks or lunch once a month. And he has been a mentor for me for now over 30 years.
That's amazing. I've never heard that story. I mean, I've heard his name before, but not kind of all those details. So that's pretty remarkable. I guess it kind of goes back to your quote. I think you said, I'm going to butcher it, but something around fate, like, or I guess there's a version of it I know. It's like chance favors the prepared. But you did have a little bit of luck, but you obviously had to work to be ready for that opportunity that got presented to you. So I
Yeah,
love
I
that.
mean, Bill met a lot of people, and so I was lucky to meet him. But then luck has nothing to do with where I got here. It certainly had to really work out. I mean, he's harder on me than anyone else I know, because he's taken a personal interest. I mean, the lessons never stop, and even now after 30 years, every time he speaks, I listen, because there's always some nugget coming out of his mouth that I can actually use in my life. And I was actually fortunate to actually meet someone like that who believed in me more than I believed in myself. And so in that respect, it was certainly luck. That's what I said, fate designs destiny. And that was a fateful day in a good way that I met him in the mailroom, and I said what I said and made an impression on him. And that's another thing too. I find that really success at the end of the day is about being likable. I'm not saying being likable in the way of just be a doormat for everybody and do everything that people want you to do, but just be a nice person. People don't want to deal with assholes. If you're nice, then you actually bring some value. It's a lethal combination. And so I was able to make an impression on this gentleman, and that has been a key driver for my success.
When I hear the story, I think of the story here from a lot of friends and just people that I know around. A lot of opportunities or jobs, if you want to call them that, aren't really advertised or like put on, like they're not public. There's the odd jobs, like maybe 10% or 20% that kind of make it out there. But most jobs are kind of like this, where jobs are like opportunities almost created for people that, you kind of network or like create relationships with, just like you did with your mentor. Um, like when you talk to younger people and you're mentoring them now, do you talk about networking, or like what do you classify as networking? Like I have a definition, and I think
Mm.
there's an authentic way to network, which is, my way of networking is like I don't really ask for stuff. I typically give, and sometimes I'll ask, but that's like it's like a very staggered ratio, or like it's the ratio isn't really 50-50, but that's okay. That's kind of how I believe in networking. So how do you think of networking, and how would you advise a young person today of how to view that term?
Okay. Yeah, look, I have never had to kind of do because once I met Bill and things started falling in place, um, but now I'm on the receiving end of it, where I get reached out by a lot of young people, especially from our community, and I always give time for anyone. And I look for certain key traits when I speak to individuals. First of all, I just like people who are fearless, who can just reach out and just send me an email, or LinkedIn me, or even just call my cell phone, or not cell phone, my office phone. I like that because that's just taking risk, and I really thrive in that. Just being fearless. Well, what am I going to say? Probably say no. That's the worst thing could happen. So what's there to lose? So I love when young people just reach out to me randomly and say, "Hey, can you give me 10 minutes or 20 minutes?" And I always give them more than what they want. And then the other part is, I would say that when you do go to, because everybody's got an ego, right? So when I hear somebody that wants to talk to me, it actually, in a selfish way, makes me feel good too. Like, okay, I can actually give something back, honestly, something valuable to another human being. That makes me feel good. So there's some selfish intent there, but I also think that, I mean, I do feel I do have a great love for our community, and I think we are one amazing group of people that can do really well in this country, and in small way can contribute to that progression along with many others. And I think that that's really a good thing to do. But when you have that opportunity, I want people to really take it seriously, because I do know, if I talk to 10, maybe 5 of them will come prepared. They ask the right question. They've done some research on me, the company, or the business. And just like, I don't think that anyone should start a network by saying, I want to get to know you, because that sounds like you're on a date. I think it would be instructive to say, listen, and I watch your career, or I watch you from distance, or I watch the company, or like just have a hook in why you're there to talk to them and what you hope to achieve. And in fact, I was talking to a young man, Tamil guy, not too long ago, and he was like a journalist, had the right questions. He thought about what he was going to say. Gave me 30 minutes. I gave him 30 minutes. He was like no time wasting. And then I was quite impressed. I gave him another 30 minutes. And then I asked him a question. I said, how old are you? He said I was 18 and still just finishing up high school or whatever.
Wow.
I was quite like actually proud, because if that's one small example of what's out there in our community, I mean, man, if I was that put together at the age of 18, I'd be, running 5 different companies at the same time. That guy was spot on. And I think that is what differentiating means, because when you network, that's great. You're lucky you get some time from someone who did what you want to do, or doing what you want to do in life. But when you have the chance, just make sure you don't squander that away. Um, Differentiate yourself. And I keep saying that throughout the interview. I will, because world is full of people, and you have to be memorable in a good way. And if you can make that impression, I'm telling you, you're going to have nothing but nonstop green light on the street of success.
I like that. Um, in terms of like obviously finance, I mean, your advice applies generally across the board, I think. But if there's somebody out there, like a young person that's possibly considering a career in finance, what specifically do they need to know? Like, when I hear finance, or like, you hear the different categories like finance, law, etc. There's certain things that are kind of glamorized or talked about, or, but there's a lot of nuances that, you don't actually know about. So what would you tell people to think about before, you know, doing some work to kind of go down that path?
Yeah, I think that you need to differentiate yourself, or you need to reconcile to yourself whether you want a job or you want a career. They're two different things. Job will give you a paycheck, and that's nothing wrong with it. I've met a lot of happy people in this world who just do 9 to 5 and make a decent income. They go home, they're great parents, parents, or husbands, mothers, great friends, and they're also happy. And then conversely, I also know people who are financially successful and miserable in life. I think it really deciding what is that you want to do. Don't be driven by just money. Um, it's okay at the initial stage of your life, because if money is the only thing, you're going to be unhappy. Don't get me wrong, I like money. Money, when people tell me money doesn't buy happiness, I think they don't know where to shop properly. But but kidding aside, I think there's a fine balance between money and happiness. Um, Money can't solve a lot of problems, but money can't solve all the problems. So really figure out earlier on, if you have the luxury to pick a career, a passion. So if your passion is finance, you think that the world of finance intrigues you and you love the intensity of it, and the rush from it, and that's a passion. And then anything that built on passion can become great careers. I always say careers will give you a lifestyle. um, Jobs will give you a paycheck. So it really depends on that. So if finance is your gig, I would say, the one thing I've noticed, successful people in finance are very extrovert kind of personalities, because it is a relationship business. People need to first trust you before they hand over their money to have you manage them. And again, when I say finance, it's a very broad stroke, because finance has many aspects to it, as you mentioned this in the outset of the question. But I would say it is a remarkable industry to be in. I actually think that what makes a community strong, three pillars. One is finance, the other one is media, and the other is politics. I think if we can get enough people into all three columns, I think our community would be very strong, 10, 20, 30 years from now, even after I'm dead and gone. I think we have slowly getting enough people into um, journalism. I think that's good to see. But certainly, we created an organization with few of us started this organization called Tamils in Finance. I'm not sure if you heard of it. So
Yes.
I'm one of the founding members of that. And the whole intention here is that try to get many young men and women in our community to look at finance as a way of a career, because it isn't traditionally a thing that Tamils go to, but there's more and more. I mean, when I started, I was probably one of the brown person on Bay Street beside a couple of Indian people. But now it's the amount of CFAs, MBAs in finance, it's remarkable. And I think we're on a very good trajectory. It's really good to see.
Did you know that every time you left a 5 out of 5 review for this podcast, a Tamil parent lets their child pursue a career in the creative arts? Okay, that's probably not true, but if there's a chance that it is, do you really want to jinx it? Leave a review. Do it for the young creative in you.
You kind of talked about, you know, I guess the next line of questioning would be around you've spent 3+ decades kind of in the space, you're going strong. At what point do you consider slowing down life working on Bay Street and possibly transitioning to something else? And maybe you haven't even thought about that. I'm just curious, like, have you thought about what's next for Roy?
Yeah, listen, this career doesn't define me. I think that it would be a sad chapter in my life if I don't have a closing chapter to my career, or my life, I should say. So the way I look at the life is one third, one third, one third. One third is you're young, impressionable, learning. Like it's like getting water from a fire hose, like it's just coming at you. And then you kind of fall into position in life. I think maybe a very small percentage of the world population would say, I want to be an astronaut by the time I was 20, and then they kind of work at it and they get there. That's probably a very tiny minority of people. But most of us kind of fall into positions in life, the fire in the belly that you didn't think you had, and it just happens, and then you get into it. So that's the one third. The second one third where you are, building a career, and then you fall in love, get married, or whatever, or not, whatever you fall in love with. It could be passion, it could be family, and you build that, and then you get to the second one third, the last one third, which is where I'm at. I'm on my back nine of the golf,
Mhm.
you know, uh, day game, and I'm no I mean saying I'm checking out, but this is my last chapter. So what am I going to do? I mean, look, I have always believed that I want to leave uh, this country better than I found it, and I want to shape policies for this country uh, the way I think should be governed. Again, I have no solution for every problems out there, but there are certain things that I like to see the country succeeding in. And the other passion I have is, again, I'm not saying I'm going into politics, but something along that line, shaping policies. And the other would be, I'm an avid writer. I find a lot of peace in writing. In fact, I think I wrote for you guys, Tamil Culture, many times, but I've written for National Post and many other publications. So writing is a passion of mine, and I know you and I spoke about briefly about my book project I'm working on, and yeah, so I have been thinking about a book in my head for now 15 years. I'm glad I didn't write it at 35, because I think 15 years later I'm a completely different person, with more experience, more tolerance, and more everything good. So I have been intensely writing this book since April 4th. That's when I actually started penning my first line, just around the Easter long weekend. And June 4th, which is exactly 2 months later, I wrote a book. And it's currently being shopped by my book agent. There are a few publishers interested in the story. Basically, the gist of the book is, my perspective on war, work, and just my observations about current political climate in just in Western world, and where I think we are going wrong or where we're going right. And so it will have a sort of a political lens to this, but through a personal story.
Look forward to that. I think you mentioned it to me, and I'm looking forward to kind of seeing more about that end project. One of the things, I guess, as I've known you kind of, for the last, number of years, is that you're obviously somebody that's not afraid to share their opinion. But I feel like, I've noticed this more and more, and I think we're seeing this kind of in the media, just kind of this echo chamber of, if people disagree on something, there's a lost art of kind of coming to the table and having fruitful discussion to actually just like learn from one another versus just kind of, someone doesn't agree with you, just kind of push them. And that's kind of how extremism happens, right? Like people people are social creatures. Like if they disagree with you and you're not giving them that chance to be heard, um, I think I forgot where was this thing to this. Um, try to think of the example, but basically, if somebody has a certain view, you disagree with them, but then
Mhm.
you give them no avenue that, hey, you're in a safe place, you can talk to me, even though we're not going to be eye to eye. They might want to leave, say it's like a hate group. The only people they hang out with people that share those views, but maybe they're looking for someone to kind of convince them otherwise. But if there's no place for them to go with those thoughts, the only place they're going to stay is in that extreme corner with those hateful thoughts. So I feel like, I mean, for myself, there's some things that I agree with you and some things that I don't. But at the end of the day, I don't, I've seen people push away people just because they disagree with that. And just, I want to hear your thoughts on like, why do you think people are that way? And like, how do you think we can get more people to the table that come from different sides of the table? So, it kind of goes back to politics, right? Even in politics, I'm seeing that where there used to be a bit more of a, like an aim to resolve people that with different backgrounds. But now I see, like just people like very hard on their party lines, not wanting to hear other viewpoints. So yeah, just
Right. It's a very we could spend an hour talking about this, and but your observation is bang on. I think the social media has, in my opinion, created a antisocial behavior among many people. It's easy to be anonymous and bash somebody than to have a person-to-person constructive conversation. And yeah, that's it. Social media is supposed to unite us, but it ended up dividing us. And it is kind of a sad state of affairs right now. And one of the reasons what motivated me to write the book is really to, tell people that, freedom of speech and freedom to think, freedom to express your opinion without punishment is it's a key tenet of just human behavior, really, but also Western democracies. And I mean, this is why the book makes sense to me, because I grew up in a country that, you know, you may think you have freedom of speech, but you have no guarantee freedom of speech, but then you don't have no guarantee after speech. It's sort of creeping up in Western civilization, where I understand that hate speech needs to be stopped. What is hate speech and who decides that is the problem, because just because you are offended by what I'm saying doesn't make you right. It's just that you're offended. Um, so I actually think that I want to hang out with people who have difference of opinion than I have, because, and like you said, the word echo chamber. I really don't think, honestly, diversity is our strength. I think diversity of thought is our strength. I have friends who are, from all walks of life with different opinions. I mean, we duke it out over pint of beer and disagree. And I said this many times. I don't need to agree with someone to like them. It would be nice to agree with them at the same time, but I don't have to agree with them all the time. Because when you disagree with those you agree with, or agree with those who you disagree with, is when you know that you have the capacity to change and evolve as a human being. Even in career, changing and evolving is an important thing, because it goes hand in hand. Stubborn people don't succeed in life because they're just stubborn on their way. They're not going to listen to anyone. They're right all the time. And I have been that guy when I was young. And as you mature, you change, you listen to other people's views, dissenting views. But more importantly, it also helps you to be tolerant of others. Only tolerating ideas that we only agree with isn't tolerance. Um, and I actually think that freedom of speech is a non-negotiable Western value. We all need to die on this hill. Free speech is the core, not just to the Western civilization, but to our identity. Because as an individual, all you are is a person, and that's the smallest minority in the world, the individual. When you start belonging to groups, you're not an individual anymore. You just lost your individual traits, and that's why I find this mob mentality of anyone who disagrees with me should be, wished to the cornfield is a dangerous trend, and it only leads to one type of thinking, and humanity doesn't progress in that type of environment. It's again, I always say that you want to listen to that one person who disagrees and the 90 people that agrees with you, because Galileo was the only guy who said the world is round. Everybody said it's flat, and they shunned him, and they were going to kill him. And then he withdrew his statement and ran away and went to exile. But he was right. So I think it's important to have people like that in the world, because the the people who think with the crowd never invent anything. Anyone who thinks against the crowd are the one that's inventing things. So progression of humanity always hinges on people who have different kind of thinking. And so that's just, like I said, I could spend an hour talking to you about this because I'm very passionate about this, the individual identity over anything else. I'm not a group guy. I don't never sign up to group thinking. I have been that way before, but I realized that's never going to get you anywhere in life.
So you talked about this evolution personally and professionally, where you were one person before, and over time, whether it's talking to different kinds of people, just evolving, you're now a different person. How do you manage those people that, you have those people that hold you to the image or person that you were 10, 15 years ago, even though you're a totally different person today? How do you deal with those kind of people? Because,
That's
I've gone through that as well. So I'm just curious about you.
that's a fantastic question, because I address that in the book as well, because I worked at CI for 30 years. It was a blessing and a curse. Blessing is because the company, you know how it operates, and people know who you are. That's also a curse, because at 20, I was a troubled kid, and I did things and said things to people that are nice or civil, and then 30 years later, I'm a completely different human being. In the sense, I'm who I am at the core, but in terms of how I would approach problems or how I would deal with people, vastly different, more sophisticated, more mature. But people will not forget, and even if you know atoned for your sins, and that will become a roadblock for you. And so when I became the head of distribution, an executive in the company, um, and there were a lot of internal strife, and and it unfortunately, because they saw me at my worst, decades ago. And if I have one big regret in my career, is that I didn't manage my optics better earlier on in the career. I was sort of pig-headed and stubborn, and I did it my way, and no one's gonna, I got a little cocky. And I mean, look, it takes one or two failures, and you realize that you are not invincible, and then you become a much nicer human being. So I can always say, I was terrible then, I'm a lot better now. And I'm sure 20 years from now, if I'm still alive, I'd say I'm better at 20 years from today, because improve is to change. And I think even as a father, husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, to it's all about changing and finding a better version of you, year over year after year after year after. And if anybody tells me that they are flawless human beings, good for you. But I think that's an oxymoron, really, because we're all flawed and kind of screwed up based on our backgrounds. And yeah, so this is it's been a had I left CI to another company, I would have started a clean slate and nobody would know the Roy that they knew 30 years ago. But unfortunately, I'm in the same company, so it's a struggle even now.
Yeah, I mean, because when I talk to people and say if I have a disagreement with my wife or disagree with my friend, for me, I look at it as, oh, the fact that I'm able to have a disagreement and we're still friends, sometimes it gets heated, but then, we apologize, whatever, and we're able to be civil or like be friends or like husband and wife. And people find it weird that, for me, I say my real friends are like people that I'm real with are people that I can disagree with. And I know that, they don't like look at me in a weird way.
Right.
Like, so it's just like, yeah, people look at me weird and I'm like, oh, like I love the fact that my wife and I can have constant disagreement about small things, but we resolve it because we're building this kind of, layer by layer, brick by brick, a strong relationship. But people are like, oh, that's weird. Like you
Mhm,
shouldn't be fighting. But it's not, I don't look at it as, I don't like the word fight. It's like disagreement, it's like a
mhm.
civil way to kind of talk about issues. But I only brought that up because I see in the news everywhere. Like, I think somebody's supposed to host a Grammys or this or that, and they, somebody found like a tweet that they posted 20 years ago, or like something they did like 15, 20 years ago, and they're holding them to it now. But somebody might be 35 and successful now, but at 15 they were like a dumb kid. How can you hold somebody to that same standard of, behavior? I just find it crazy. It's not like when somebody does something really bad, I'm not like, oh, don't hold them or don't get them to atone for it. But you have to forgive people at some point, or like nobody's perfect. So how do you? Yeah,
Right.
it's just ridiculous. Yeah.
I actually, that's another thing we can spend a lot of time talking about is the line keeps moving in the human morality department, right?
Mhm. Yep.
If you go and watch documentaries of what happened in 1400s, I mean, it's appalling what human beings did to each other, and they still do. I mean, it's happening in Sri Lanka as we speak. But I think that you hit it on the nail, hit it on the head, nail on the head, is that um, look, we have to learn from history, and that we do. And history is ugly. I mean, even Canada has an ugly past, and as we found out just recently with the terrible events in Kamloops, and that's coming back, showing, highlighting a dark past of this colonial past of this country. Now, yes, so we have to atone for it. We have to make things right. But at the same time, we have to look back in the history and say, show me one person who was completely flawless, right? But they also contributed positively to humanity as well. You look at WW2, and I know there's, talks about certain leaders at the time, remove their statues and all that stuff, but they also stopped fascism from coming to the West, and so they did a lot of good things. So I think you can, safely say that you can put a ledger, good and the bad, and then you can fill both columns, and then try not to do the bad stuff they did. But there are a number of areas where the attitudes and values will change over time, and because we get better as human beings, and embracing a sweeping knee-jerk reaction for remedying historical injustice isn't a pragmatic way to do it. Now, in saying that, I kind of jokingly say this: 100 years from now, maybe what we did today will look appalling to that group of people, right? I mean, imagine if someone said 100 years from now, I can't believe human beings owned dogs,
Mhm.
right? I mean, it's
Sure.
another living, breathing thing, and you actually put them on chain and drag them around. I mean, I'm not even being facetious. It could happen, right? Because owning a dog is a lovely thing now, and maybe 100 years from now, people look at us like Neanderthals and horrible human beings. So yeah, I think we just need to, try to make the wrongs done in the past right by the best we can do with today's resources we have, identifying those groups that's been hard done by. And I always say, like, it's not about, like, we have to bring equality about more pragmatic ways. You don't bring equality by bringing, it's not a seesaw. We don't pull someone down to bring the other one up. And we just do both at the same time, keep the person up there and then push these people up by having, policies that make sense. And, it's not about, I have a rule at CI in my hiring practices. I say, let's lower the barrier, but don't lower the bar, because, you need to give, access to better education for everybody, opportunities, and bring about changes corporately, you know. But at the same time, we have to have a minimum set of standards for achievement. Otherwise, you're just going to appeal to the lowest common denominator. That's not how societies progress. So it's a very complicated subject, of course, but I'm glad that you're thinking about that. It's refreshing to hear that.
You have a. I notice when you talk, you always have a lot of very potentially memorable kind of slogans or taglines. The one like you just said. What was it? Don't lower. Was it?
Lower the barrier, not the bar.
Yeah, very memorable. I think you've said like 5 or 6 of them. If I go back in this conversation, I'll find them. But I notice you have that habit, which is good. It'll be good for your book.
Well, that's also part of me talking about differentiating yourself, right?
Yes.
Because because I spend a good part of my life as a traveling salesman, and this opened me up to a lot of different human beings and how to hold attention, how to read body language, and I really I wouldn't say perfected it, but I spent a lot of time studying about it and how to say how to get to someone with less words and more powerful sentences that will be, as you said, memorable. The conversation will be differentiated from the other 5 conversations the client had that day. And that's just important. This communication is important. And I think one of the things I would say to anyone who's listening, and one other part of the success that you should focus on, how to communicate your ideas to people. Like if you're an entrepreneur today, you could have the best idea, but if you don't know how to pitch that idea in a very meaningful way, you're never going to get funding or have somebody listen to it. You have to have content, but communication is very important. So if you're a budding entrepreneur or professional of any kind, spend some time on presentation skills. It's very important. And I've learned that early on in my career, and I spent quite a bit of money and time in that space, and it's been very helpful.
Money can be hard to come by, but here's a $100 opportunity for you. Join my free newsletter for free exclusive content and a free chance to win $100 when I hold special draws. Did I mention that it's free?
So what do you like to do for fun outside of work?
I've lived out west for more than 2 decades, and I picked up a habit of climbing mountains. It's my one of my passion, climbing. And so I don't do much here now, but I'm actually starting to go overseas to do these things. And so I did Kilimanjaro climb last year, 2019, summited, raised some money for mental illness in our community. And I did Machu Picchu in 2011. I was going to go to Denali in Alaska last year, obviously, because of COVID. So I find, I always said that, beside walking being the most ancient exercise, something about climbing mountains, it's kind of synonymous with struggles of life. And it's almost like reaching the next level of my life is like climbing mountains, I always say. So climbing is my passion. Obviously Toronto doesn't lend to that passion that much because we don't really have a lot of mountains here. But so I'm kind of training now soon to see if I can tackle Denali. So that's one of my passion. The other is, obviously, as I said, writing is my ongoing passion. I like to write and say things about observation I make about social issues, and in a way that is not bashful, but something that's constructive. So those are 2 things that keeps me entertained. Maybe if I leave the business one day, I probably just like to be a writer. And hopefully I'm financially um, settled enough that my son is out and doing his thing. So he's my biggest focus right now, trying to get him to be a better human being, and because ultimately I'll be judged by that.
What's an insecurity that you have?
Uh, just too many to list, but I think one of my insecurities is that whether it's real or not, my insecurity is that people doubt me. I just think that every time I'm talking to someone, they just doubt me in the sense that I'm not capable of doing something, right? And I think that comes from a little bit of how I grew up. I mean, I wasn't academically, um, great. I was an average student. I mean, I didn't really apply myself. I had other skills, but we were all born with different skills. I wasn't going to be a doctor or engineer. I can guarantee you that. So growing up, I was always kind of, even people in the family would say, this guy's not smart, he's never going to achieve anything. So I have that sort of insecurity a little bit. That was something that, drilled into me. Unfortunately, when I was very young, people would say things like that. This guy will amount to nothing in life. And so it kind of deep in my bone marrow. And so I have that insecurity. So I counterbalance that with a little bit of chip on my shoulder, right? And now I'm more balanced because I have a chip on both shoulders. But so that would be my, one jumps out, my insecurity. So that has negative reaction to things. So even in relationships, if my wife says something, immediately your default gear is like, wow, she doesn't think I'm capable of doing it, right? So it leads to unpleasant engagements with people, but I have to really watch for that. The other is I always had a hair trigger, which really didn't help me in my career. It actually hurt me a lot. So one of my biggest failures is that is I could fly out the handle just like that. And those things are never a good thing in a boardroom setting. So I always said that I wish I was a thermostat, not a thermometer. I don't know if I explained this to you. The thermostat controls the temperature in the room, and thermometer rises to the temperature. So I was a thermometer. So I'm more of a thermostat now than I have been in the past, for sure.
You talked about this briefly, but obviously being somebody in the financial, like in a company like CI, and just kind of some of the aspirations you have. Um, I want to ask you a quick question about kind of money in just general. Like, how do you view money, and like how do you like personally invest? Whatever you want to share. Just because I feel like people don't really talk about, you know, like money is kind of looked as an afterthought. Like make enough money, live your life, etc. But I look at it more in a pragmatic and planned manner where like I know what I need, why I need it, and I'm not striving to like do anything above and beyond that, because like you said, there's people with tons of money that are unhappy and people with not that much money that they're happy. I think it's just a matter of knowing what you want to do with money that makes you happy or joyful, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, like how do you look at money? How do you invest? Just whatever you want to share.
Yeah, look, I think you need to have some financial success, because I do think that um, I've been poor and it's not fun. And so I'm not by any means, you know, extremely wealthy, but I'm well to do. I think I don't really need a bigger house, because that's how I look at it. Okay. I don't need a bigger home. I don't need a faster car, although I had them all. But if 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 I'm at a certain age, say 70 years, and I'm sitting there, I would just be happy to be able to travel one or twice a year to the reasonable places. I'd be happy to just go out with my friends, but not to worry about, but be able to pick up the bill at dinner. So I don't think that that's how I look at it. Can it furnish me with the life's basic existence without worrying about it? And I couldn't care less about having homes in Florida and warm places and any of that stuff. And I know some people like that, and there's nothing wrong with it. Just my way of looking at money. And I've seen money can do to people. It have changed a lot of friends that I know that it's funny how I always say that if you want to know about someone, give them two things: money and power, and then you'll know the real person. And I don't want to ever try to project myself as some kind of a perfect specimen. Look, we all have flaws. I said this so many times, but I think the one thing that you should never forget is who you are, where you come from, and you can never deny that. You can deny that in public, but you can never deny that yourself. And I always run paranoid for a long time because I just I would hate to lose everything that I acquired, including my financial success. So I'm very careful about how I take risk now, but I still take risk. I've been wiped out before financially, especially in 2000 to 2001 during the dot-com bubble, and I've never done that before after. And yeah, so it just another thing is too, like, I want to be able to provide something for the family. And if my son wants to go to a university that's going to cost more money, I want to be able to provide that. So like I said, if I can get that him out of the way, not I'm to like I want to be able to provide life, just saying, like, get him to be a successful human being in the sense of balanced and a reasonable head on his shoulder. And ultimately that's how you're going to be judged by what kind of human you brought up in this world. And if he's a good person and someone who's going to contribute to society at large, then I think I've done my job. And so money in that sense is helpful, but it is not all. And also if I can buy some nice wine, then I think I'm okay, because that's one of my passions, by the way, collecting wine.
Well, that's a kind of a good segue into the final segment, which is called Creator Confessions. It's meant to be a speed round. I'm going to put out a bunch of statements, and you're going to just say the first thing that comes to mind. Ready, Roy?
Good.
All right. Favorite Tamil food?
Cooked roti.
Something that scares you?
Not having a companion in life.
Favorite show you're watching?
Peaky Blinders.
A place you're itching to travel to after this pandemic is over?
Hawaii.
Fellow Tamil creator you want to give a shout out to?
Era Alhambram.
Favorite childhood memory?
Riding a bike with my dad to the fish market.
Pet peeve? Sorry, pet peeve.
Pet peeve. People working on their phones when someone's talking to them. And then people replying to all in the emails.
Person/celebrity you look up to?
Oh, this is a tough one. I would say, it has to be a celeb?
It could be anybody.
I'd say Clint Eastwood.
If you knew you were going to die tomorrow, a regret that you would have?
Not being a better son.
This one's celebrity. So celebrity whose life you want to experience for just one day?
Al Pacino.
And finally, a PSA that you want to leave our audience with?
PSA. Well, I would say, if you're not on the ledge, you're taking too much space. So keep pushing yourself to the ledge and take that risk, and you'll see great things will happen to you.
There you have it, guys. Roy, always measured words, as you kind of heard him. He's got the way with words, and he mentioned he has a book coming out. We'll hopefully hear more about that. But thank you, Roy, for kind of jumping on the podcast. It was a blast. I mean, we breezed through like an hour pretty easily. For anybody kind of listening and they loved kind of what they heard and they want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to connect to you?
Well, you can email me at Roy_Ratnavel. It's RATNA, V as in Victor, EL @hotmail.com.
Perfect. There you have it. And thank you to the audience for listening. And we'll see you on the next episode, guys.
Thanks a lot for having me.